Welcome to Life Simplified. This is Tiffany, and I'm going to be your host for today. This month is all about our throwbacks. So we're taking a look at some of our favorite podcasts from this past year, and we're just revisiting them, catching up with each other to see how we're doing on these topics, and encouraging you, our listeners, to either listen to this for the first time or go back and revisit along with us and see how far you've come in 2024. So for me, today I picked attitude adjustment as my throwback. And this is throwing it back all the way to January. So we're going back to the beginning of the year. And when I was thinking about some of my favorite episodes this year, I was thinking, what is something that I know I need a reminder of and that is always relevant? And so attitude is just one of those things that I think we have to constantly be evaluating and assessing and trying to figure out, am I where I want to be? Am I not where I used to be? If that was bad and I'm trying to get better, that's a good thing. And so right now we're in the thick of the holiday season and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of commitments. There's a lot of family time and friend time and travel and all the things. And I think attitude is really important to think about as we go into these events and these times that can be stressful, but can also be an awful lot of fun. And we're also heading into the beginning of another new year. And so I think it's always good for us to reflect on attitude. So I don't want to spoil any of the content really that is in this podcast because it's so good, and I actually went back and listened to it this morning as I was driving, and it gave me some good reminders. But some things that I will say is, as you listen, we talk a lot about assessing our own personal attitude, thinking about what attitude means to us, and the attitude is not negative. I think you'll hear us say that we tend to think attitude is a negative thing, but we can have a positive attitude, and that's what we're hoping to develop and continue to grow in. And so some of the things we talk about is looking at, do I have a positive attitude? But where I want to really hone in with you ladies as we kind of update is we talked a lot about how our daily routine makes a big impact on the attitude that we have, and that there are certain things we can do to try to either start in the right frame of mind or other things. And so I am going to hit on those. So when we think about routine, we talked a lot about positive relationships. We talked about how we start our day and how that we have routines that promote positive energy and keep us in a positive mindset throughout our day. We think about our state of mind and are we aware of it? And if I am aware of it, am I able to change it once I recognize that maybe my attitude is not as lovely as I'd like it to be? And then the last piece that we talked about, daily routines, is my living space a positive environment? And so I'm just going to throw it out to you two. And there's only two of them with me. I have Ashley and Joni with me today. Amanda is still loving on her new baby boy. So we're shouting out to her. She's going to join us shortly. So stay tuned for that. But when you think about those four things, positive relationships, how you start your day, awareness and ability to change your mindset, and then your environment, where do you all feel like you are with your attitude? And maybe if there's anything you've changed or adapted over this past year, and give me the good, the bad, the ugly, because we're all living life and we're doing our best.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and tell myself this morning, as a lot of you all know, when my husband, he works out of the county and state, and he called me this morning, and I don't know why I just had a really bad attitude with him this morning. I'm just going to be honest.
It happens, right?
And then I thought about it, and I thought, he was not ugly to me. Why did I have an attitude with him? So I called him back, and I just like, I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know why I was acting that way, but sometimes that's it. But one of the big things that I did change is the way that I react to people. Used to, I would just pop off whatever come out. And I have really tried this year to have a positive outlook on everything and the people that are around me. And I try to really sit back and think about what I'm going to say, if it's going to be a positive or a negative towards whoever it is or whatever it is.
I love that. And I love that you shared that with us, because that's exactly what this podcast is about. This episode, when we think about attitude adjustment, is that ability to start having more awareness of our attitude and how it affects ourselves and others. And then the ability to be adaptable and change and say, just because this may be who I've been in the past, I don't have to do that. And I may slip up and go back into those old kind of routines, but I can then see it and I can continue to work on it. And so I love that. I think that's great.
Well, I have really been working on attitude this year. I kind of felt for the last probably 2 years that I've just kind of been in a slump. And when I'm with my girls, negativity was coming out. And I felt like I was constantly venting about just a personal disappointment. And I have been trying to switch that around, because there is a reason for this situation. And while I may not know what that reason is and may not understand it, constantly being negative and sad about it is not helping me. So I have been trying to switch that, and I still have my days when I'm like, oh, but why? But for the most part, I feel like I have changed my attitude. And when we're all together, I'm not constantly thinking about that and talking about that situation. And then as far as the space, the living space, and making that a positive environment, I have been really trying to declutter. And I'm trying to think if that episode was this year or if we did an episode on organization last year.
It was last year.
Last year. Okay.
Yeah.
So...
And we do talk about decluttering in this podcast episode too.
Yep.
So you're going to get to hear some more about that as well.
And my youngest and I spent an entire weekend working on her room. I had intended to work on the whole house, and we were going to get the house cleaned up and ready to decorate for the holidays. But we ended up in her room and decluttering that. And it was a big weight off of her to have that done. It was a big weight off of me to have that done. And then now I'm just trying to slowly go through different areas of the house so that everything has a place to be, a home. And I think that will help me with an attitude, because if I'm coming in and I'm like, why are there so many shoes right here? And I'm part of the problem. Like, I kick my shoes off and they stay there until I pick them back up again. So I'm not blaming anyone in my household, but we all do that. And that's a lot of shoes that just end up in the floor. So we're working room by room to kind of get things a home.
I think that's all good stuff. And by the way, the shoe thing, I think it's universal, because piles of shoes also at my house. But I like all of those things. You give so many different examples of ways that you've been able to reframe situations. And it's all about our mindset. And we talk about that in this episode. But remembering that our thoughts affect our behaviors and our feelings. And they're also intertwined, that if I am focused on the yuck or the disappointment or the hurt or the struggle, then that is where I stay. And I get stuck in that cycle. But when you're able to say, okay, I don't know what the purpose of this is, but I'm not going to stay here stuck in that yuck. I'm going to change my mind and focus in on the positive, on the good, on the blessing, on the gratitude. It makes a big impact. And so I was trying to think for myself too, what are some things this year? And overall, like, just thinking, I feel like this has been a pretty good year for me. Like, I don't, that I can recall, I don't think of any major extremes. And so to me, that's a win that we're not in extremes. I'll take the middle of the road. But listening to to the episode this morning and thinking back about these things, I have spent a lot of time this year trying to focus on spending time with people that are positive and uplifting and that I enjoy, and also doing things and activities that I enjoy. Because one of the things we discuss in this episode and you'll hear is being positive, like have fun, laugh, don't take yourself too seriously. It's the idea of enjoying life. And so I think I've tried to be intentional of spending time with people and doing things that I enjoy doing, and I feel like it's been good. It's been a good year. I've been able to enjoy my husband and my kids and my friends and deepen some relationships. And then also for me, positivity and attitude and all that like is very spiritual in nature. And so investing time in those things and groups of people that are like-minded and I feel like are uplifting, I think all of that's important, is that you find that for yourself. And so I feel good about where I'm at, and I'm excited to have these reminders going into the new year. So I thank you ladies for sharing like all this great progress. It's exciting to me, it's encouraging to me, and I think it's encouraging to our listeners as well. So go listen. It's right now. It's starting this second. Listen to the rest of Attitude Adjustment and let us know your thoughts and what you've been able to do to make positive changes to your attitude this year.
Sometimes life is messy. Have you ever wished you could refocus your mind, home, relationships, and work life? Join us as we use research-based information to make practical changes and simplify life. This is Life Simplified.
Welcome to Life Simplified. We are so happy to have you join us as we continue to dive into Season 2. This month, we've been focusing on a new year and new mindset. So keeping with that trend, today we are going to discuss attitude. And I think that's kind of a loaded word sometimes. So before we even dig into any of the research or the information, I just kind of want to throw it out there, ladies. What immediately comes to mind when you hear the word attitude?
That sometimes my kids have attitude.
Yep.
Mine was more like usually when it's a negative thing. Like when you hear our kids got an attitude today, or it's not usually a positive thing. Sometimes, but most of the time when you hear attitude, it's negative.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, when I was kind of putting this together, I was like, attitude. Like, I know there's multiple different ways we think about the word attitude and what it is. But I immediately think of like, oh, the teenagers. And not just like everybody's teenagers. I think they all get a bad rap. But like my teenagers, I want to be like, oh, that attitude. But we all had it. And you're right. We're thinking about attitude in the negative sense of attitude. You know, maybe like the other words we would use would be like sass or, you know, whatever. That's kind of what we think about is that. But then I think we also just know from living life in general that the attitude's so much more, like, you know, how we kind of face things and what we think about them. But I don't think we ever really think about the working definition of what is attitude and what do we do with attitude. And so I pulled together some information just for us to kind of discuss today. And these came from a couple different curriculums that we use pretty widely in extension, both at the University of Kentucky, and then I think other universities use these things as well because they're not just specific to just us. But a lot of what I'm going to pull from today comes from Keys from Embracing Aging, as well as Money Habitudes. And so we will have links in our show notes to that information if you want to know more about those specific curriculums. But I wanted to kind of give a shout out to where I'm pulling some of our information from. I wanted a definition that would make some sense to us, and you can find all kinds of different kind of thoughts on what attitude is or isn't. But I like to go with subconscious thoughts and feelings. And so to dig into that a little bit more, like that is basically like my attitude about something is already there before I'm even at that event, before I'm even dealing with it. It's kind of like under the surface, my thoughts and feelings about something that I don't even realize are my thoughts and feelings. I think for the most part, those attitudes and that idea of it being subconscious is that it's like such automatic thought processes for us that we don't even realize that that's how we feel, or that we're going into it with that train of thought. And our attitude is influenced in so many different ways by our own experiences, but we also get our influences with our attitude from our family's experiences, our friends' experiences, our culture's experience. And so, like, thinking about that, it makes sense that we kind of already know what we think about something before we even experience it for ourselves even, right?
And I think too that I was thinking about if you had done something before and had a negative or a positive experience, then you expect that to happen. Like if it's an event that you go to every year and you had the best time, you're like excited to go, your attitude's positive. But if it was negative, you're like, man, we gotta go to this again. So yeah, like as you were talking about, like experiences that we've had and those preconceived notions that just automatically are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things that we use a lot of time as an example of this is basically how we feel about like pets, like a dog, for example. You know, if your experience was that you had pets and you had dogs at your house and you loved them and they were great and they, you know, improved your way of living, then you're going to have a very positive outlook on that. But maybe your experience was that they were dangerous. Maybe you got bit or you were scared and there's fear attached to it. So there might be a more negative attitude. And all that's under the surface is just from that experience you grew up with. And I think that's how we mold all of our attitudes, is by those experiences or by the stories we hear from our family and friends about their experiences. Because sometimes I don't even have to live it for it to affect me. You know, we can have one of you in this room could tell me a story about something and all automatically like that is going to affect my attitude towards that thing because you're my people. And when our people tell us about their experience, it impacts us whether we were there for it or experienced it ourselves or not.
I think that's important to think about when you have kids.
Yes.
And how you perceive and your attitudes. If you don't want to go to something and you're complaining and talking bad about it, then they're going to take on that same attitude. And that's so our last year our word's intentional, and so this year we've kind of talked about awareness is maybe a good word for us. So thinking and being aware of how your attitude is and how it can affect your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Awareness is key. And because it's subconscious, sometimes we're not aware of it. So now that we know, we can pay more attention.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, you got to think of it like this. We are going to feed off the people that are around us, you know, and that goes right hand in hand with our children. You know, a lot of people say, oh, she's acting just like you. And then you sit back and you think, well, maybe she is because she's seeing the attitude that I'm having towards things too. So then your children pick up on it and other people as well. So, you know, we got to think about the environment. And I love that our word this year is awareness, because being aware of everything, you know, and being more intentional with that awareness, I love it.
Absolutely. And I think I was thinking as you were sharing, Joni, like attitude is contagious. You know, if you're around positive people, have a positive outlook, you tend to be more uplifting and upbeat. And then if you're around negativity, man, it's easy to really get in there and be like, yeah, you're right. This is bad and that's bad and this is horrible and I don't want to do that. And so we have to check ourselves, you know, how am I influencing those around me? But am I surrounding myself with people that are influencing me in a not so great light? And you know, the connection between our mind and our body is so strong that our attitude and the way we think, because remember that attitude is our thoughts, the way that we think about things, it affects everything. Like it affects our overall happiness, health, well-being. You know, how successful I'm going to be in life is determined by my attitude. How I feel and look mentally and physically is impacted by my attitude. What I do and say is impacted by our attitude. You know, our thoughts are so powerful. Our mind is such a powerful tool. I don't even think people realize what we just let ourselves think about and focus on really impacts every single aspect of our life. You know, in the therapy world, the mental health world, we have cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's because we know that our thoughts affect our behaviors and our feelings. And so if we can begin to change our mindset, begin to think a little bit differently and have more awareness of where we're letting our mind go and how we're feeding into those thoughts, we can make a huge impact on ourselves, both emotionally, but also physically as well. And I think we don't really think about how powerful that is. And I'm not saying it's easy, because we can all get stuck in a funk. Like, it happens. We know that. And I acknowledge that it's not easy. But with awareness of how powerful our mind is, we can use that to our advantage when we know that we're stuck in a rut. So my next question for you all is just just snap. Don't even think about it too hard. But do you have a positive attitude?
I'll just tell you, it depends on what the situation is. I used to think that I had a really positive attitude on things in life, and I tried to be upbeat about it. And as I've got older, I've noticed that sometimes I don't have the positive attitude. And, you know, as we was talking about and planning for our podcast for this year, I've tried to be more aware of who I am and that I can be that person that is not, you know, positive all the time. And I'm trying to change that, you know, because I used to be. And I don't like the fact that everything that comes out of my mouth sometimes is negative. And so I'm really just trying to be more aware of me, myself, to be that positive person that I used to be. And for my kids, my coworkers, you know, my friends, just having that around for this year.
So I'm kind of the same. It depends on the situation, but I'm more of a realist. And so sometimes that's not a good thing, because I thought about this the other day. My husband and I were talking about something, and he's like, "You're just a Debbie Downer." And I'm like, "I'm being real. Like, I am being realistic in this situation." And he was like, "You're just being negative."
I love it. I love it.
So again, I'm trying to be better and not, because I feel like we all have these things and you can fall into it too deeply. And then if I fell into the realist too deeply, sometimes that can be negative. So it depends on the situation, but I'm working to be on the positive side of the realism.
That is so funny, because I feel like you were inside my brain just then, because I was sitting here thinking like, man, I am a realist. I'm very much like, okay, let's just be honest here. Like, let's look at it for what it is, which I think can be helpful at times. But you're right. Sometimes, like, I can err on the side of that's not super happy, Tiffany. Could you get yourself together? And so I am aware of that. And I think I've really become aware of that more in, I would say, the last couple of years. And so I've been trying to be more intentional on focusing on what my attitude is. And if I'm being positive, I would have to say, if I'm being completely transparent, I have just a natural suspicion of people and things. And so I'm a watcher and I'm a listener, and I can be guarded at times, which is odd because it's not in every situation. But I am I know I can lean that kind of way. So I try to do better. And there's some things that I've tried to implement in my life to change my outlook. But yeah, I think we can all identify with, we sometimes have a great attitude about things, and sometimes maybe not so much. Maybe our realism and our suspicions and our past experiences kind of come at us, and we have a hard time going at it with a positive attitude.
Don't you also think that it depends on if you really want to do it or not?
Oh, for sure.
I know we'll just throw out there doing the laundry.
Well,
you know,
yeah.
sometimes I do not have a good positive attitude, even though it's great when they're all put up, washed. But, you know, sometimes I have a really bad attitude about that. So, you know, it depends on the things also we want to do in life, if we have a positive attitude or not.
I agree. So there's a publication, and I kind of want to go over a few things, because it said, do you have a positive attitude? Which is what we just discussed. And we realized that sometimes we do, but maybe not all the time. And I think sometimes it's hard to identify that in yourself too. Like, do I have a positive attitude? How do I kind of check myself for that? So there's a bunch of questions here, and we don't necessarily have to go through all these. I just kind of want to read them off to get you thinking as you're listening to this podcast about, do you have a positive attitude? And these questions are some ways you can kind of do a personal internal check. And so they have, are you optimistic, easygoing, or extroverted? Are you willing to learn no matter how difficult it is? Do you laugh a lot or have a sense of humor by not taking yourself too seriously? Do you express emotions rather than bottle them up? Do you do your best when studying or working and try to improve how you do your work? Do you demonstrate enthusiasm in whatever you say and do? And do you welcome challenges, experiments, or try new ideas? I really liked these questions because when you just asked me, do you have a positive attitude? Well, like, okay, either I'm in a good mood or a bad mood is kind of what comes to my head.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than that. And these questions really allow us to kind of dig deeper and self-examine. And I don't know that I even have all the answers to these questions, but I think they're good for us to kind of start taking a look at. Like, where do I fit in here? Maybe I have more of a positive attitude than I thought I did, because maybe I can say yes to a lot more of these things than I would have thought that I can say. And if we don't, then I think these questions also lend us to say, okay, well, how do I become more positive? Well, if I'm answering no to these, then I know the opposite is what helps me to become more positive. But there is another list that they give us on developing a positive attitude, and I think it's funny because they're so like obvious, but then you go, but how? So I'm going to read those to you, and then let's discuss that just a little bit. So developing a positive attitude, it says be confident, be positive, be patient, be a goal setter, be a hard worker, be fun, and be accepting of change. So like, just want to pause there for a second. All of those I'm like, yeah, but how? So what do you think when you hear those? Are you like, yeah, whatever? But what comes to mind for you all? Because I think it's funny when you read that a little bit to me. It feels like common sense,
It
right?
does. Yeah. It feels like, well, yeah. But like, I'm thinking like, don't take yourself too serious. Sometimes, a lot of times I do that. And it's probably just the time of the year, and sometimes there's pressures of life, you know, and you're like, I don't have time to be that fun. But then you can find things to do it, but you're obviously be fun. Of course, if you're fun, you're in a good mood.
Right.
And then I thought be accepting of change. How hard is that?
Right? And it's funny because y'all can't see this, obviously, you can only hear us, but on the notes that I made for everybody, I bolded that one. So I don't know if y'all noticed it, but the be accepting of change, it's bold because being able to adapt is one of the keys of positive attitude. And I think a lot of times when we kind of get twisted and go into that negative mindset is when things don't go the way we expected them to or we wanted them to, and it really can kind of throw a wrench in everything, and we can allow that to really ruin our day, ruin our week, take us off track, and we lose our focus there. But when we can become more accepting of change and we can be more flexible and able to adapt better, then we can maintain that positive attitude throughout life's ups and downs, because what we know is going to happen is we know there's going to be change. And I think we all got an extra dose of that during COVID and the pandemic and all the things that changed pretty much overnight for us. We survived that, and I think the gift that we have out of that is we know we can pivot, we know we can change, but trying to take that big scale to like, how am I okay with accepting change when it's just an everyday something?
You know, you're sitting here talking about that, Tiffany, and you know, as you've listened to our podcast last year and that, you all know that I'm in a different chapter in my family sense than the other ladies, and talking about the accepting of change. That's been very, very hard for me this past year. I had a lot of change with my kids. I have one deployed. I have one that moved out of the house. I still have one at home, but you know, it's hard to accept that change sometimes. So I've really have done a lot better with it, but sometimes it's really hard to change it, and you get through it sometimes even though we feel that we don't, you know. And I agree with that statement you said, Tiffany, of, you know, when we can do that, that's a lot, you know. And sometimes it's really hard, but just remember, you're going to get through it and it's going to be okay. You know, just having that mindset sometimes hard, but just know that you will be able to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when you brought up the expectations part of it is key for me, because sometimes and I'm guilty, I expect things to be a certain way and then they're not, and then you're negative and you're like, oh, it just is never going to work out. I don't even know why we try. And that's that negative, but changing it, and I think being aware is definitely key in accepting those changes and just trying to make it a positive attitude.
Yeah, I immediately think of family vacations because I am the queen of like expectations because I'm the planner. I love to plan it. I like to map it all out. And then we all know inevitably that is not going to go the way you pictured in your head. And you can either be like, all right, well, this is a waste of my time and money and this was terrible. And you can get stuck there and ruin the rest of whatever the trip is. Or you can be like, all right, well, that was a thing. Now let's just see how we can thrive in the rest of this and save it. But yeah, being adapting to changes, it's hard because it's our comfort zone getting switched, and nobody really likes that. But I do think that it is a key to being able to maintain that positive attitude because it can really just derail us so much. And then I want to bounce back to the be fun, because the be fun, don't take yourself too seriously. It's come up a couple different times. In my research when I was looking at positive attitude, there was a whole lot of don't take yourself too seriously. And frankly, it stepped on my toes just a little bit. Because I do think sometimes I do take myself too seriously and I can be offended about silly things that I shouldn't be at times. But then I got to thinking about that and I was like, you know what? It's when you're basically, I take myself more seriously when I'm around people that I don't feel safe with. You know what I'm saying? Because I think when
that makes sense.
You can joke more. Like I think about it, I'm like, I can joke more with people who I know really know me and I feel safe with. And I know like it's all in fun. But if it's someone new or you don't really know them that well and you're not sure how to take them, it feels like it stings a lot more. And so I think that's maybe what we need to be aware of too, is like, have fun, have a good time. But if everybody's constantly stepping on your toes, you're having a hard time not relaxing or taking yourself too seriously, maybe it's like digging deep in those relationships and trying to build more comfort and knowledge of each other. Just getting deeper with people. And sometimes I think we just have to adjust our people. Like, not everybody's for us. I think we have to know that. We're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to be our cheerleader. And so the more we can surround ourselves with those people that are positive, the more positive we can be in our attitude as well. So I love all of these ways that we can develop a positive attitude. But one thing that I thought was really cool too about this article that comes from the Keys to Embracing Aging, which I like to just call Keys to Embracing Life, because I think it's just how we live life to our best. But they talk about doing things that make you happy. And that's so intuitive that if I do more things that make me happy, I'm going to be more positive in my attitude. Like, just makes sense. But I think we forget that. And so, like, the things that they listed under doing things that make you happy, they talked about, building those close relationships with, I think, if I have a closer relationship, maybe I'll take myself less seriously and I'll have more fun. Caring for others, engaging in healthy, active lifestyles, embracing spirituality, practicing positive thinking or your mind, using that tool, embracing a hobby or activity, and identifying strengths. And I love all those because I think we've had a podcast on almost every single one of those topics.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah.
Which lets me know, like, we're on the right track, ladies. We're doing the things. And I know sometimes we get repetitive, but I think it's because we need repetition. Like, as humans, we know a lot of these things, but then life gets in the way and we forget to put it into practice. So I think I love this podcast because it not only helps us remind you listeners the things that we already know, we remind ourselves the things we already know, the things we're teaching others, and like remember, like, okay, I got to continue to practice this each and every day for myself. And so one thing that I also found when I was thinking about attitude this week was, you think about doing these things that make you happy, and all of those things make a lot of sense, but it's our daily routine that really matters, because we can have one event that makes us happy, but if we do that once a month even, that's a lot of time of our life that we're not super happy, and maybe we can find ourselves going back into that more negative attitude. And so they're talking about how routine's so important. And so I have some questions for us to begin thinking about, like, is my routine helping me to have a more positive attitude? And if not, like, what can I change just in my day-to-day life that can help me focus in more on that positive? So the first question I have is, do I have beneficial positive relationships? And I know we've done relationship podcasts, so we've kind of talked about that, but how do you feel like, if you just really break it down do you feel like you have beneficial, positive relationships in your daily life?
So the key to that for me is daily life. Like you mentioned, doing something fun or visiting or doing something once a month doesn't always make you happy the rest of the time. And so, of course, I have the best, when your spouses, you have up and down days. Most of them were positive. So other than that, I do try to touch base with my mom, of course, once a day. But other than that, on a daily thing, I don't think I try to make contact with my friends all the time, or as much maybe as I need to do. So I think that's something that I could work on, because I do have positive relationships, and it's every 2 or 3 weeks or something like that we'll talk or hang out, but not a daily thing. And even if it's not daily, maybe just more frequent.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amanda. Sometimes you got to sit back and you got to look of what that positive is in your life. And sometimes we lose sight of that as well. And, some days is very positive in my life, and then some days it's not. But I'm the one that most of the time it ends up negative with it. So I'm like you. I need to start, adding them people that make me have a positive relationship more in my life than I do. I got to be positive, and getting that positivity from somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because if you're spending more time with those people that make you feel good, I mean, like you mentioned before, your attitude's going to be better. You're going to physically feel better, even though you're not really thinking about it in that way. And I think with having my little has put that a challenge, and he's a little bit older. He'll be 2 this year. So I'm having a little bit more free time, and he's more independent, sometimes too independent, but I think now is the time that I have to transition into that. So I think it's a life phase thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every step of the way, our busyness affects our positive relationship, our commitments affect our positive relationships, all the things that we choose to do. Remember, it's that life balance. And so what are my values, and am I giving that my time? But I think about these positive relationships too, and I think really investing in the people that you are going to be around on a regular basis, and then those ones that you don't get to see, but you really value that person, like they really have something to add to you. That intentionality from last year, and then that awareness of like, maybe I need to step up. And I know that's me. Like, I'm speaking to myself there. Sometimes I have to just really remember to step up for that. And so maintaining those relationships with your partner, with your children, with your coworkers, because we spend a lot of time with our coworkers. We probably spend more time FaceTime with our coworkers than we do with our family or our other friends. And so trying to build good, working, positive relationships with those people. And then if there are people in your life that you see every day that you really don't have control over, that maybe are more on the negative attitude side, just finding ways to limit that interaction and not allow yourself to become a part of that, but instead allow yourself to be the positive influence. And I have a problem with that, because I could get roped into someone else's attitude real quick. And so wanting to make sure that I'm trying to be the one uplifting the mood instead of helping contribute to bringing it down. And so really thinking about like day to day, and then those other things that you do, for me, spiritual connection is important. And so I have groups of people that I fellowship with in that way, and that's valuable, and that builds positive relationship. And so just thinking about all of the areas of your life that you have relationships, if it's something I value, how do I continue to deepen that and really focus in on that?
Also, life gets in the way.
It does.
We get busy, and sometimes we lose that connection with other people, but then being more intentional, more aware of, why do we not talk to them anymore? Because they was a, positive in our life. Sometimes life happens. And so just being able to step back and say, okay, we need to build that gap. I need that person back in my life too, that, helps me be the better person. Either it may be your spouse, it may be your friends, it may be your kids, whatever it may be, but just being aware that, okay, life, slow down so I can step back and then start building that relationship back with that person.
Yeah, and making that space where you say, I'm going to intentionally schedule this time to feed these positive relationships, because that turns into the fun. And we need the fun for the positive attitude. And I think it's when we spend time with people that we enjoy is when we have the fun. And so that all kind of goes together. So then thinking about our daily routines and these positive relationships and how we can keep a positive mindset and attitude, the next kind of piece is, how do I start my day? Do I have a routine that promotes positive energy to keep a positive attitude all day long? So think about those morning routines, the way you start your day, because really I think however we start really impacts how the rest of it goes. And clearly we can pivot throughout. That's part of that adaptability. And I have to do that on a regular basis. But I just want to think, in general, how do you feel about how you start your day, and the kind of the energy that puts into your day?
So over the past month, I've been trying to get back into my physical fitness because I enjoyed it so much before I had my kid, and then, valued sleep more than waking up early and working out.
Yes.
So
Me too.
I have started getting up a little bit earlier, and even if it's just for 30 minutes, just trying to do something to be active. And I feel like that has really gave me a positive attitude throughout the day. I really can tell a difference since I've started doing that.
I really can't think of anything positive, that I've started doing to help my day, because usually my husband, he works out of town, and I really think about the negative with this, but only because I get up in the morning, I get dressed by myself. I don't have to talk to anybody. It takes me a little bit, to get woken up and everything. But when he's home, he aggravates, so that sometimes turns into a negative. But then I change, but that's one thing that pops in my head is like, okay, give him grace. He's happy to be home, even though he's aggravating me. He's happy to be home. Let him, to some degree have that. But, just knowing that that's there, kind of makes you negative. But, for the most part, I try to start my day off with the positive, either, as Tiffany was talking about a while ago, spiritually. I try to do a devotion in the morning before, I start my day, have a, 15 minutes, 20 minutes before I do have to start getting ready, of having that time to myself and, studying.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think both of those examples you gave are perfect because, Amanda, you're focusing in on that engaging in a healthy, active lifestyle and, and getting all those endorphins going and just really waking yourself up in a good way. And then, Joni, you're talking about getting into your devotion and really starting on a positive mindset, because I don't know, a devotion, that's what it's all about, is positive attitude, and reflection and focusing in on the good. And so I think that's a perfect example of starting and getting a good mindset from the very beginning. You all know, for me, what my morning routine is. I get up every morning with my husband. We have coffee first thing. We watch whatever we're watching together. Lately, it's been a lot of documentaries, so they're, just trying to learn all the things. But for me, it's a really great way to start because that's our intentional together time. And I think it's funny because Amanda's husband does not believe that this actually happens. So
yeah, he doesn't believe it.
If you're listening, true story. I'll have my husband vouch for me. But yeah, that's what I do, and it does help me kind of ease into my day. It's that positive relationship building with my husband. My body does in fact need the coffee, so the caffeine does help with that a little bit. What I will tell you is I have to be very careful because I can start with that very positive energy, but I have 3 children, and sometimes just getting out of the door can change my mood drastically. And so that's one of the things that I have to really focus in and try and make sure that I allow enough time for all the things that we're going to forget, or all the times I'm going to have to say put your shoes on, or all the times we're going to have something come up that wasn't really in the plan. So that adaptability really comes in every single morning for me. And for the most time, that is good. But I have to really be careful because we can get in an argument in the car on the way to school over the silliest things. And then even though I started my day with some positive time, it can flip a switch. And so I have to be careful that I don't let that kind of take over and mandate what the rest of my day is going to look like. And so I think even if you have the best intentions in the world and you have that awareness, I know it's going to be hard. And I don't want anybody listening to us to think that we've got it figured out, because we know we don't. And we know life happens, and you can have all of the best intentions in the world to start out with a positive, and things can be thrown at you. But that's where we adapt, and that's where we pivot, and that's where we get pause and say, okay, this doesn't have to steal the rest of my day. Like, it was a thing, it wasn't great, didn't love it, but let's try and put it back on track. And so that's big for me.
I love how you was talking about, far as your kids, been there, done that, the same, but then also if I we start off as on a bad, foot with you and your children, or me and my children, that also rolls into their day, at school. Mm-hmm. So yes, it happens, like I said, I've already lived through that with my kids, but if we've got a bad attitude and fighting and fussing, and you let them off at that door, that can hinder as far as how their day is gonna be as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And I've even had times in the car where I've been like, all right, let's decide to start over. Like, let's just, all that just happened, all of our frustrations at each other, all of the whatever that just went on, let's let it go and let's just start brand new right now. And sometimes my kids look at me like I'm full of nonsense, and I'm sure I gave my mom similar looks.
I can't forget what you said to me. Or, you're mean, Mom. Yeah,
right, exactly. So sometimes we get that response, and sometimes they're like, yeah, you're right, this is not good, I don't want to do this. But yeah, we affect each other's day. You're absolutely right, Joni. Like, it's not just me that ends up being like, what is happening? They're at school and they're trying to learn and they're trying to do what their job is, and it can distract them as well. And so that impact we have on each other is huge. The next question, as we're thinking about our daily routines and how it affects our positive attitude or not, is, am I aware of my state of mind and its changes? If I'm in a negative state of mind, am I able to change it?
I love the fact with that is, am I aware of the state of mind, because, and can we change it? Mm-hmm. We can change anything if we're willing to change it, and being self-aware is key to it too. We know that for ourselves that we can change whatever. Now, doesn't mean that we would not like to change other people and their attitude, but being aware of ourselves. And I like that, how you brought that out in that question, because sometimes we forget that we are in charge of how we feel and how we do things in life, and that we are the ones that can change that, not somebody else. It's for ourselves.
No, I agree. The question is, am I able to change it? And I'm like, Am I able to? Yes. Do I always? No. But we're talking about positive and changes, and I think the awareness is key, and I've really tried to be better about it the past 6 months, and it's challenging, but I think I'm getting there, and I think the key to it is just the awareness. Just if you're in a bad mood, or if you walk into work and you're grumpy and you don't say good morning to, your coworkers or whatever, you're continuing that negativity. And if I just walked in and just said good morning with a smile on my face, is that going to make my day a little bit better?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I love that it actually says awareness. Like, am I aware? And awareness is our word for the year. So that's perfect. And I think, sometimes we are unaware of our attitude because we let our emotions just completely derail us. And I don't think that we realize it all of the time. And I'm guilty of this as much as the next person. And, having a mental health background, you would think, oh, this is what you do. Yeah, knowing something and doing it all the time are two different things. And so having awareness of that in myself is really important. And then, am I able to change it? And so I will say that I have had times in my life where I have allowed my emotions to get the best of me, and I have found myself stuck in a rut, resentful, and just, miserable. And as a mental health clinician, I thought, okay, what are you doing? Like, you know better. How do we change this? And I will tell you all, the thing that has made the biggest impact for me in my life when I've found myself in stuck situations, and I've allowed my emotions to really just kind of take control of me, is taking a step back and really focusing on what I'm grateful for. Gratitude has been the biggest tool I've been able to use, and it sounds so simple, it sounds so silly, and sometimes people are like, what do you mean? But I'm telling you, in some of my most yuck places, when I have just finally taken the initiative to stop dwelling on all the things I'm frustrated with, all the things I'm hurt by, and focus on all of the things that are so very good and that I don't deserve, but I have, it changes everything. Like, my complete mindset shifted in days. You know, things don't have to be super complicated to make an impact. I think sometimes we think, oh, I need this really intense whatever. No, sometimes it's just changing my mind. And that doesn't mean that the hurts or the fears or the struggles aren't still there. It just means I'm not giving it all my focus and attention. And so if there's nothing else that anyone gets out of this today, I hope it's that, you know, like, just changing your mind and what you decide that you want to give all of your focus and thoughts to can make a huge impact. And once we start doing that, everything looks a little bit different. We're a little bit more caring for others. We're a little bit more understanding of others. We're more willing to recognize our part in the things that we're frustrated with or hurt by. And then we can begin to heal and change and grow. And so I think having that awareness of what's going on and then just changing my mind and saying, you know what, I can't change this situation, but I can change what I'm thinking about, what I'm meditating on. And so for me, it's going back to the gratitude. And I've heard my whole life, have an attitude of gratitude. And, it sounds silly because it rhymes and you're like, okay, but it makes sense. Like it does. Legit.
And when several months ago, I saw something on social media and it said changing your mindset to, instead of like, man, I've got to do this, or like, is this ever going to end, to I get to do these things. And I've really been trying to be more mindful of that. Like when I'm walking through the house and I fall over and stub my toe on all these toys and I'm like, what is this? How did our house look like a bomb went off? But then I'm like, I get to pick up these things. Like, it's not going to be there forever and I get to do this, and just thinking it in a positive way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with kids, like, there are all of those things that come along with it that can be overwhelming at times. We're in the phase where we're doing all the extracurriculars. So it's all of the practice runs and the games and the tournaments and the whatever, non-ending. And sometimes it can be like, gosh, I just need some free time. But I get to do these things with my kids right now, and it won't be forever, like you said. This is just a life stage, and so how I look at it is everything. And so for the most part, I can say that I truly enjoy getting to do those things for my kids and with my kids and experience that. And so I think you're right. Like, just our mindset of like, not I have to, but I get to. And it's a gift instead of a challenge or a burden. Our last question, as we think about our daily routine and how it affects our positive attitude. And this is a different way of looking at it. This question was a little bit different for me, but I think it's worth talking about because we've actually sort of hit on this in past podcasts. And is my living space a positive environment? If not, what can I do to make it a positive environment? And so some of the examples are like, do I need to change the lighting? Do I need to add color? Does it need to be decluttered or cleaned up? But just thinking about your environment, how does it help or hinder your ability to have a positive attitude?
Well, I'll just tell you, having a clean house, talking about the toys, Amanda's, the kids and that, just having the ability, sometimes the house just aggravates me, and it's nobody's fault but my own a lot of times, because I'm busy and I don't clean it or get to pick up like I want to because I've come in late and I'm tired, but being able to do little things and making your house feel more better, not as dirty, having that routine of it. Because actually I may sit down and I made myself a list each day. I'm going to work on this part of the house, and being able to do that and not being overwhelmed with every bit of my house being, the dishes need to be washed, the floors need to be swept, just doing a little bit at a time throughout the week on each day has helped me because my kids can contest. I get kind of upset, when they're not picking up their dishes or cleaning their rooms or, are not doing things that I've asked them to do. So it's solely on me now. So making sure that I do what I need to do so that way I don't get mad at myself or anybody else because of the house.
So this year we have a new goal. So we're not really big on resolutions, but we set a family goal to declutter. So once a week, we're going to pick an area to go through and then either donate or get rid of. And so our first task was the cups. And I'm sure everybody. So I know my husband got a little overboard, but I'm like, let's just focus on one thing.
The free plastic cups that just multiply.
Yeah, the coffee cups. And so I was like, okay, this week we're going through our cup cabinet and we're going to get rid of it. And just doing that. And then when you open the cabinet, it's like, you don't feel as stressed.
Yes. They don't fall out on top of you.
They don't fall out on top of you. You don't hurt your toe in the morning when you're trying to get coffee. So that's our thing that we're trying is just to go through a drawer, go through a closet or something once a week. And I think that's definitely going to be something positive for us because you all, and I'm sure, our listeners know too, stuff accumulates so quickly. And then one day you're like, where did this come from? Why do I have all these things? So that is our goal. And of course we're only a week into the new year, but we've done it. And so this morning I was like, okay, what are we going to tackle to this week? This weekend, what's our thing we're going to go through and try to declutter. So that's ours.
I love that. So I told you all, right now we're on a kick where we're watching a lot of documentaries and docuseries and things like that. One of the things we watched recently was on the idea of minimalism and just kind of decluttering your life from all the stuff that we have and how our stuff really actually breeds unhappiness because it's just everywhere and we think it's going to make us happy and then we don't have money and it's a whole thing. And I do encourage the documentary if someone has time for it. And that's something we kind of thought about too. We have stuff. And my husband hates clutter. He is not a knickknacks person. He's not a decor person. He could live a minimalist lifestyle super easy. But he lives with 4 other people that have a bunch of junk. So we have junk. But we're trying to eliminate that. And we've been able to do that a little bit piece by piece, as we've moved a couple times over the past couple years. Each time I try to kind of purge some things, but that stuff still kind of comes with you more than you realize. And so we worked on his closet not too long ago and kind of got his stuff cleaned up to things that he's actually using and wearing and, not stuff from high school that we're like, why does this exist anymore? This is not a thing. And I'm just as guilty of the same things. But one of the things in this documentary that they encouraged, if you were wanting to kind of start cleaning out the junk piece by piece without being totally overwhelmed, as they said to take this 30-day challenge where the first day you get rid of one thing that you're not using. The second day you get rid of 2 things, and it goes on for 30 days. And you think about that, by the time you're at the end of 30 days, you've really eliminated quite a few things. Now, we all have so much stuff that probably it's just the tip of the iceberg, but it kind of gets you thinking in that sort of a way. But I do think that our stuff, our clutter, really distracts us, and it can really affect our mood. Because I know if I come in my house and it's a disaster, I almost feel like I can't breathe, which is weird because clearly it's not physically hindering my breath, but we feel bogged down by it. So I do think if our environment is a little chaotic or a little cluttered, that can keep us from having a positive attitude. So that's really important. I also think we've talked about this before. I think having natural light can be really nice, getting fresh air, being able to open a window or being able to sit outside on a patio, like those type of environmental things. I think they also breathe positivity into us too. That kind of having nature brought to the inside makes an impact on us. So like the colors we use and the sounds we have, all of that really plays a role, but I don't think it's something we typically really think to focus on when we're thinking about our attitude. Like it's probably the last thing on our list of what should I do to have a more positive attitude. But I like that it's in here, and I like that we're discussing it, and our listeners can be thinking about it for themselves too, because all of it plays together. And I think it's the biggest thing is like it's all intertwined. You know, our attitude is intertwined with our physical health, is intertwined with our mental health, and all of the things. And so as we get going on this new year and this season 2, I hope that everyone will take the time to really assess their attitude, be really honest with yourself, think of the areas in which you can improve to improve your attitude, but also celebrate what you're doing well, because I know we're all doing good things too. And so I don't want us to harp on the negative. Really embrace the good, and then make changes where you feel like you can. So I encourage you all to check out our show notes for more information. We thank you for joining us. This is Life Simplified.
Thanks for listening to Life Simplified. We are family and consumer sciences agents with the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service. Contact us at lifesimplifiedpodcast@gmail.com.